Have you ever looked at an old family photograph and felt like something was off? Today, we're diving into one of the most unsettling discoveries in photographic history. This is the story of a seemingly ordinary Christmas dinner from 1909 that hides a chilling secret, one that wasn't discovered until over a century later. If you enjoy mysteries that blur the line between the explainable and the inexplicable, you're in the right place. And hey, if you're already hooked, don't forget to leave a like. It really helps the channel grow. Before we begin, I want to tell you about another channel I'm developing where I explore even more mysterious content. Check the description below for the link. Now let's step back to Christmas Eve 1909 and uncover what really happened in that photograph. December 24th, 1909. The Hartwell family home in Providence, Rhode Island, was alive with the warmth of holiday preparation. Snow had fallen steadily throughout the afternoon, blanketing Benefit Street in a pristine white that reflected the glow of gas lamps. Inside the three-story Victorian home, the scent of roasted goose, cinnamon, and pine filled the air. Margaret Hartwell, the family matriarch, had spent the entire day preparing for this moment. At 42, she was a woman of precision and tradition. Her dark hair was pulled back in the style of the era, and her high-collared dress was spotless despite hours in the kitchen. She moved through the dining room with practiced efficiency, adjusting the placement of silverware and ensuring each candle stood perfectly straight. Her husband, Thomas Hartwell, sat in his study reviewing ledgers from his textile business. At 47, Thomas was a respected figure in Providence's merchant community, a man whose word carried weight and whose success had built the comfortable life his family enjoyed. He rarely smiled, but tonight, even he seemed touched by the spirit of the season. Their three children completed the household. Eleanor, at 19, was the eldest, a thoughtful young woman who had recently begun teaching at a local school for girls. She helped her mother with final preparations, her movements graceful and measured. 16-year-old Samuel was home from boarding school, his presence filling the house with youthful energy that had been missing for months. And then there was little Catherine, only 7 years old, who darted between rooms with the unbridled excitement only a child on Christmas Eve could possess. "Catherine, please settle down," Margaret called gently as her youngest daughter spun in circles near the Christmas tree. "Our guest will be here any moment." The guest was Margaret's younger sister, Abigail Warren, who had traveled from Boston for the holiday. Abigail had never married, dedicating her life instead to charitable work among the city's poor. She was 38, with kind eyes that had witnessed more hardship than her privileged sister could imagine. At precisely 6 o'clock, Abigail arrived, brushing snow from her traveling coat as she stepped into the warmth of the Hartwell home. The family gathered in the foyer to greet her, and for a moment, everything seemed perfect. A snapshot of Gilded Age prosperity and familial love. Dinner was served at 7. The dining room table was a masterpiece of holiday abundance. The golden brown goose, roasted potatoes glistening with butter, cranberry sauce in crystal bowls, fresh bread still steaming, and pies waiting on the sideboard. Margaret had outdone herself. They took their places around the table. Thomas sat at the head, Margaret at the foot nearest the kitchen. Eleanor and Samuel sat on one side, Catherine and Abigail on the other. The arrangement was traditional, proper, exactly as it should be. "Before we eat," Thomas announced, raising his hand, "I've arranged for something special." He had hired a photographer, a luxury in 1909, when photography was still a formal, expensive affair. The photographer, a thin man named Mr. Aldrich, had arrived earlier and set up his equipment in the corner of the room. His large format camera sat on a heavy wooden tripod, its brass fittings gleaming in the candlelight. "A photograph!" Catherine squealed with delight. "Oh, Father, truly." "To commemorate this evening," Thomas said, allowing himself a rare smile. "Our family together, on Christmas Eve." Mr. Aldrich worked methodically, adjusting his camera's position, checking the available light from the candles and the chandelier above. "Please, everyone, remain still," he instructed. "The exposure will take several seconds. Try not to blink or move." They arranged themselves as he directed. Margaret's hands rested on the table before her, positioned near her plate, a fine china piece with a delicate floral pattern, part of her wedding set. Thomas sat rigid with dignity. The children tried to contain their excitement and hold perfectly still. "On my count," Mr. Aldrich said, ducking beneath the black cloth behind his camera. 3, 2, 1. The flash powder ignited with a bright pop and a puff of smoke. For a fraction of a second, the room was illuminated more brightly than midday. Then it was over. "Excellent," Mr. Aldrich declared, emerging from beneath the cloth. "That should be a fine image. I'll have it developed and delivered before New Year's." If you're enjoying the video so far, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps. The photograph was duly delivered on December 30th. When Margaret opened the envelope, she smiled at the image. There they all were, frozen in time, looking perhaps a bit stiff but unmistakably themselves. The photograph was everything she'd hoped for, a permanent record of a perfect evening. She had it framed and hung it in the parlor, where visitors could admire it. Over the years it remained there, a testament to a time when the family was whole and happy. When Margaret passed away in 1943, the photograph went to Eleanor, who had married and had children of her own. From Eleanor, it passed to her daughter, then to her granddaughter, Jennifer Hartwell Morrison, who inherited it in 2018. Jennifer, a marketing executive in Boston, had little interest in dusty family heirlooms. But during the pandemic lockdown of 2020, while sorting through boxes in her attic, she found the photograph. Curious about her family history and inspired by genealogy websites, she decided to have it professionally digitized and restored. She chose a local restoration specialist named David Chen, whose work with antique photographs had earned him an excellent reputation. David accepted the project enthusiastically. "Early 1900s glass plate photography," he said, examining the image. "Beautiful quality for the time. I'll scan it at high resolution and clean up any damage." 2 weeks later, David called Jennifer. His voice was uncertain, almost hesitant. "Jennifer, I've finished the restoration, but there's something you need to see." Jennifer drove to David Chen's studio on a grey February afternoon in 2021. Boston was still locked down, streets quieter than they'd been in generations. David's restoration business operated out of a converted warehouse in Cambridge, its industrial windows letting in flat winter light. David met her at the door, mask on, maintaining careful distance. He seemed agitated in a way that made Jennifer uneasy. "I almost didn't call you," he admitted as he led her inside. "I thought maybe I was seeing things, but I've looked at this image hundreds of times now, and, well, you need to judge for yourself." His workspace was cluttered with equipment, multiple monitors, high-resolution scanners, specialized software for digital restoration. On the largest monitor, Jennifer's family photograph was displayed, sharper and clearer than she'd ever seen it. "It's beautiful," she said. "You did amazing work." "Look at your great-great-grandmother's plate," David said quietly. "The china piece in front of her. I've enlarged it here." He clicked his mouse, and a section of the image filled the screen. The china plate was now visible in extraordinary detail. Every painted flower, every gold rim detail, every subtle reflection on its glossy surface. And there, in the curved reflection of the plate's surface, was a face. Jennifer leaned closer, her breath catching. It was unmistakably a human face, pale, indistinct but clearly there, eyes, a nose, the suggestion of a mouth. It was looking directly at the camera, or rather, directly at whoever was looking at the photograph. That's just a reflection, right?" Jennifer said, her voice uncertain. "Someone standing behind the photographer?" David shook his head. "That's what I thought at first. But look at the positioning. Based on the angle of the plate and the known position of the camera, this reflection would have to be coming from someone standing directly beside or slightly behind the photographer, Mr. Aldrich. Maybe it was Mr. Aldrich's assistant. Photography in 1909 was typically a one-person operation for home visits. The equipment was expensive, complicated, and look at this. David zoomed in further. The face became slightly more visible, pixelated, but detailed enough to see it wasn't distorted by the plate's curvature in the way a normal reflection would be. It appeared almost superimposed, as if someone had stood directly in front of the camera lens. Could it be a double exposure? Jennifer asked. Maybe the plate was used twice. Glass plate negatives don't work that way. Once exposed and developed, they're permanent. And there's something else. David opened another window showing the original scan. I thought maybe it was damage to the plate, a crack, a spot of deterioration that coincidentally looks like a face. So I examined the physical photograph under magnification. The image is there in the original. It's not a scanning artifact, not digital manipulation, not damage. Whatever this is, it was there on Christmas Eve, 1909. Jennifer stared at the face. Now that she'd seen it, she couldn't unsee it. Those eyes seemed to look through the decades, directly into hers. Who could it be? She whispered. That's what I was hoping you might know, David said. Do you have any family records from that time? A diary, letters, anything that might mention the photograph being taken or who else was in the house that night? Jennifer thought of the boxes in her attic, the generations of accumulated family papers she'd been slowly sorting through. I might. I'll look. She took copies of the enlarged images home. That evening, she sat in her living room, the photographs spread before her, and began searching through her family's papers with new urgency. Eleanor Hartwell, the eldest daughter in the photograph, had been a meticulous record keeper. Jennifer found her diary from 1909, a leather-bound book with pages yellowed but still legible. She flipped to December. The entry for December 24th was brief. Father hired a photographer for dinner. Catherine couldn't sit still. The flash powder made us all blink. A lovely evening, though Mother seemed distracted afterward. She kept looking at the dining room doorway as if she'd seen something. December 25th. Mother barely slept last night. She claims she heard footsteps in the empty rooms upstairs. Father says it's the house settling in the cold. December 26th. The photograph arrived today. Mother looked at it for a long time but said nothing. She's asked Father to take it down, but he refuses, says it cost too much money to hide away. Leave a comment below about what you think of the story so far. Jennifer's hands trembled as she read. She continued through January 1910. The entries became increasingly concerning. January 3rd. Catherine woke screaming last night. She said someone was standing at the foot of her bed watching her. Just a nightmare, surely. But she was so frightened she slept in Mother's room. January 10th. Samuel returned to boarding school today. He seemed relieved to leave. He told me privately that he feels watched in this house, as if there are eyes in the corners where shadows gather. January 18th. Mother has taken ill. Dr. Whitmore visited but can find nothing physically wrong. She simply lies in bed, staring at the ceiling, and won't speak of what troubles her. The entries stopped on January 24th, 1910. There was no explanation, just blank pages after that date. Jennifer searched for more records. She found a newspaper clipping from the Providence Journal, dated February 2nd, 1910. Local family tragedy. Margaret Hartwell, wife of prominent merchant Thomas Hartwell, found deceased in her home. Cause of death under investigation. Another clipping from February 5th. Coroner rules Mrs. Hartwell's death accidental. She fell down the main staircase during the night. Husband states she had been suffering from nervous exhaustion and insomnia. Jennifer sat back, her mind racing. She picked up her phone and called David Chen. I found something, she said when he answered. About the photograph, about what happened after it was taken. Tell me, David said. David Chen and Jennifer Hartwell Morrison became unlikely research partners, united by their obsession with the mysterious face. David's technical expertise, combined with Jennifer's access to family records, created a unique opportunity to investigate a mystery over a century old. Their first step was to enhance the image further. David used advanced software originally developed for forensic applications, programs that could extract detail from photographs that human eyes couldn't perceive. He worked for days, adjusting contrast, sharpening edges, filtering out noise. The face became clearer, though never completely distinct. It appeared to be male, pale-skinned, with dark hair. The expression was neutral, almost blank, but the eyes were disturbing in their intensity, fixed, unblinking, staring. "I want to try something," David said during one of their video calls. "Facial recognition technology. I know it's a long shot with an image this degraded, but modern AI can work with surprisingly little information." He ran the enhanced face through several databases, public records, historical photograph collections, genealogy sites. Nothing matched. Whoever the face belonged to, they weren't in any searchable database. Jennifer, meanwhile, dug deeper into her family history. She discovered that the Hartwell house on Benefit Street still stood, now divided into apartments. She arranged to visit, curious to see the space where the photograph had been taken. The current owner, a history professor named Dr. Linda Reeves, was intrigued by Jennifer's story. "This house has always had a reputation, Doctor," Reeves said, as she showed Jennifer through the building. "Nothing dramatic, but tenants often mention feeling watched. Cold spots in certain rooms, the occasional unexplained noise." "Do you believe in ghosts?" Jennifer asked. Dr. Reeves smiled. "I believe that old houses have personalities shaped by the lives lived within them, whether that's supernatural or simply psychological. The power of suggestion, the creaking of old wood, I couldn't say. But something about this place has always felt occupied." The dining room where the photograph was taken had been converted into a living room. Jennifer stood in the space, trying to imagine that Christmas Eve 111 years ago. She took photographs from various angles, trying to match the perspective of the original image. Back home, she compared her photographs to the 1909 image. The room's basic structure remained unchanged, the same height, the same window placements, the same fireplace. She could identify exactly where each family member had sat, where the photographer had positioned his camera, and where the mysterious figure would have been standing. According to the angles David had calculated, the person whose face appeared in the plate's reflection would have been standing approximately 3 feet behind and slightly to the left of photographer Aldrich. Close enough to be clearly reflected in the plate's surface, close enough that Aldrich should have noticed their presence. Jennifer called Mr. Aldrich's great-grandson, Martin Aldrich, whom she'd located through a genealogy website. Martin, a retired accountant in Vermont, was delighted to discuss his ancestor. "My great-grandfather kept meticulous business records," Martin said, "including notes about his photography jobs. Give me a moment to check." He returned to the phone several minutes later. "Found it. December 24th, 1909. Thomas Hartwell Residence, Benefit Street, Providence. 1 8x10 family portrait. Payment received $12. And here's something interesting. There's a note in the margin. Subject complained of unusual cold in the room. Multiple takes required due to subject restlessness, particularly the youngest child." "Multiple takes," Jennifer said. "How many?" "He doesn't specify, but he makes a note about using extra flash powder, which was expensive. If he was taking multiple exposures, that would explain the extra cost. But the strange thing is, he only delivered 1 photograph. The others must not have turned out." "Is there any mention of anyone else being present during the photography session?" "No, just the family and himself. He was quite precise about such things. If there had been an assistant or anyone else, he would have noted it." Jennifer thanked him and relayed the information to David. They sat with this knowledge, trying to make sense of it. What if, David said slowly, the face isn't a reflection at all? What if it's something that was actually in the room, captured by the camera, but invisible to human eyes? That's impossible, Jennifer said, though her voice lacked conviction. Is it? Photography in its early days captured things people couldn't see: ultraviolet light, infrared, certain chemical emissions. The human eye and photographic emulsion don't perceive the world identically. What if there was something in that room, something present but not visible, that the camera's chemistry could detect? You're talking about something supernatural. I'm talking about something unexplained, David corrected. There's a difference. They decided to research other historical photographs from the same era, looking for similar anomalies. The internet provided countless examples of supposed ghost photographs from the early 20th century, but most were obvious fakes, double exposures, intentional manipulation, or cases of pareidolia where random patterns resembled faces. The Hartwell photograph was different. The face was too clear, too deliberately positioned. It wasn't a smudge that vaguely looked human. It was a human face, reflected or captured or manifested in a way that defied easy explanation. Jennifer found one more piece of evidence in Eleanor's papers, a letter Eleanor had written to her Aunt Abigail in March 1910, 2 months after Margaret's death. Dear Aunt Abigail, I know you told me not to dwell on Mother's passing, but I cannot help but feel there were circumstances surrounding that night that we never fully understood. Mother, in her final weeks, spoke of a presence in the house, someone she could not see but sensed watching us. She said it had been there since Christmas, since the photograph was taken. Father dismissed her concerns as nervous exhaustion, but I wonder now if she knew something we did not. I have removed that photograph from the parlor wall. I cannot bear to look at it anymore, not after noticing what appears in Mother's plate, that awful face, those watching eyes. I do not know what it means, but I know it frightened her, and now it frightens me. Please write soon. Your loving niece, Eleanor. The photograph had frightened Margaret Hartwell, had frightened her so thoroughly that, according to family records, she had barely slept for a month before her fatal fall. What had she seen in that reflection that the others had missed? David Chen and Jennifer Hartwell Morrison became unlikely research partners, united by their obsession with the mysterious face. David's technical expertise combined with Jennifer's access to family records created a unique opportunity to investigate a mystery over a century old. Their first step was to enhance the image further. David used advanced software originally developed for forensic applications, programs that could extract detail from photographs that human eyes couldn't perceive. He worked for days, adjusting contrast, sharpening edges, filtering out noise. The face became clearer, though never completely distinct. It appeared to be male, pale-skinned, with dark hair. The expression was neutral, almost blank, but the eyes were disturbing in their intensity. Fixed, unblinking, staring directly at whoever looked at the photograph. I want to try something, David said during one of their video calls. Facial recognition technology. I know it's a long shot with an image this degraded, but modern AI can work with surprisingly little information. He ran the enhanced face through several databases, public records, historical photograph collections, genealogy sites. Nothing matched. Whoever the face belonged to, they weren't in any searchable database. Jennifer, meanwhile, dug deeper into her family history. She discovered that the Hartwell house on Benefit Street still stood, now divided into apartments. She arranged to visit, curious to see the space where the photograph had been taken. The current owner, a history professor named Dr. Linda Reeves, was intrigued by Jennifer's story. This house has always had a reputation, Dr. Reeves said as she showed Jennifer through the building. Nothing dramatic, but tenants often mention feeling watched, cold spots in certain rooms, the occasional unexplained noise. Do you believe in ghosts? Jennifer asked. Dr. Reeves smiled. I believe that old houses have personalities shaped by the lives lived within them. Whether that's supernatural or simply psychological, the power of suggestion, the creaking of old wood, I couldn't say. But something about this place has always felt occupied. The dining room where the photograph was taken had been converted into a living room. Jennifer stood in the space, trying to imagine that Christmas Eve 11 years ago. She took photographs from various angles, trying to match the perspective of the original image. Back home, she compared her photographs to the 1909 image. The room's basic structure remained unchanged. The same height, the same window placements, the same fireplace. She could identify exactly where each family member had sat, where the photographer had positioned his camera, and where the mysterious figure would have been standing. According to the angles David had calculated, the person whose face appeared in the plate's reflection would have been standing approximately 3 feet behind and slightly to the left of photographer Aldrich. Close enough to be clearly reflected in the plate's surface, close enough that Aldrich should have noticed their presence. Jennifer called Mr. Aldrich's great-grandson, Martin Aldrich, whom she'd located through a genealogy website. Martin, a retired accountant in Vermont, was delighted to discuss his ancestor. "My great-grandfather kept meticulous business records," Martin said, "including notes about his photography jobs. Give me a moment to check." He returned to the phone several minutes later, found it. December 24th, 1909, Thomas Hartwell Residence, Benefit Street, Providence, 1 8x10 family portrait. Payment received $12. And here's something interesting. There's a note in the margin. Subject complained of unusual cold in the room. Multiple takes required due to subject restlessness, particularly the youngest child. Multiple takes, Jennifer said. How many? He doesn't specify, but he makes a note about using extra flash powder, which was expensive. If he was taking multiple exposures, that would explain the extra cost. But the strange thing is, he only delivered 1 photograph. The others must not have turned out. Is there any mention of anyone else being present during the photography session? No, just the family and himself. He was quite precise about such things. If there had been an assistant or anyone else, he would have noted it. Jennifer thanked him and relayed the information to David. They sat with this knowledge, trying to make sense of it. "What if," David said slowly, "the face isn't a reflection at all? What if it's something that was captured by the camera in a way we don't fully understand?" Early photographic chemistry was unpredictable. Glass plates, silver compounds, exposure times. There were so many variables. You're suggesting it could be some kind of photographic artifact. I'm saying we don't know. Photography in 1909 was still relatively new technology. There are documented cases of unusual phenomena captured on film that have never been fully explained. Not supernatural necessarily, but unexplained. If you're enjoying the video so far, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps. They decided to research other historical photographs from the same era, looking for similar anomalies. The internet provided countless examples of supposed ghost photographs from the early 20th century, but most were obvious fakes. Double exposures, intentional manipulation, or cases of pareidolia, where random patterns resembled faces. The Hartwell photograph was different. The face was too clear, too deliberately positioned. It wasn't a smudge that vaguely looked human. It was a human face, reflected or captured or manifested in a way that defied easy explanation. Jennifer found one more piece of evidence in Eleanor's papers. A letter Eleanor had written to her aunt Abigail in March 1910, 2 months after Margaret's death. "Dear Aunt Abigail, I know you told me not to dwell on Mother's passing, but I cannot help but feel there were circumstances surrounding that night that we never fully understood. Mother, in her final weeks, spoke of a presence in the house, someone she could not see but sensed watching us. She said it had been there since Christmas, since the photograph was taken. Father dismissed her concerns as nervous exhaustion, but I wonder now if she knew something we did not. "I have removed that photograph from the parlor wall. I cannot bear to look at it anymore, not after noticing what appears in Mother's plate, that awful face, those watching eyes. Please write soon. Your loving niece, Eleanor." The photograph had frightened Margaret Hartwell, had frightened her so thoroughly that, according to family records, she had barely slept for a month before her fatal fall down the stairs. Jennifer also discovered medical records from Providence Hospital. Margaret Hartwell had been admitted briefly in mid-January 1910, 3 weeks before her death. The admission diagnosis: acute nervous exhaustion and persistent insomnia. The attending physician's notes, written in tight cursive, described Margaret's condition. Patient presents with severe sleep disturbance, reports recurring nightmares, and exhibits signs of acute anxiety. Patient insists she is being observed by an unseen presence in her home. Husband reports patient has become fixated on a family photograph. Physical examination reveals no organic cause for symptoms. Recommend rest and sedation. Thomas Hartwell had apparently refused to remove the photograph, seeing his wife's fear as irrational, a manifestation of the nervous disorders so commonly attributed to women in that era. David had been conducting his own research into the house's history. "I've been looking into records before the Hartwells lived there," he said. "The Providence Historical Society has documents dating back to the 1700s. The house was built in 1876 by a man named Jonathan Prescott. He lived there with his family until 1895, when they rather abruptly moved to New York. The house stood empty for several years before Thomas Hartwell purchased it in 1899. Why did they leave so suddenly? The records don't say explicitly, but I found something in the Providence Journal archives. In 1894, a man named Edward Marsh, who worked as a groundskeeper and handyman for the Prescott family, disappeared. Just vanished one October night and was never seen again. There was a brief investigation, but it went nowhere. Jennifer felt a chill run through her. "Do you have a photograph of Edward Marsh?" "I've been searching. Nothing yet in the databases I've checked." But 3 days later, David called her, his voice tense with excitement. "I found something, not a photograph, but a physical description from the missing person report filed in 1894. Male, Caucasian, approximately 30 years old, dark hair, medium build, pale complexion." And Jennifer, the report notes that he had intense dark eyes with a fixed, unsettling stare that made some uncomfortable. The description matched the face in the reflection. They sat in silence on the phone, both processing this connection. It proved nothing definitive, of course. A description from 1894 and a blurry face in a 1909 photograph weren't conclusive evidence. But the coincidence was deeply unsettling. "What happened to him?" Jennifer asked quietly. "Unknown. The investigation concluded he likely left Providence voluntarily, possibly to avoid debts or personal troubles. But his belongings were found intact in his room above the carriage house. His wages from the previous week were never collected. People who knew him said it was out of character for him to leave without word." Jennifer thought about Margaret Hartwell's terror, about Eleanor's letter, about that face staring from the china plate. "What if he never left?" she whispered. Jennifer's obsession with the photograph deepened over the following months. She contacted Dr. Linda Reeves again, asking about the basement and any renovations done to the house over the years. "Funny you should ask," Dr. Reeves said. "When we did renovations in 2016, the contractors found something odd in the basement. There was a small space behind a brick wall, maybe 6 by 8 feet. It had been deliberately sealed off, probably sometime in the 1890s based on the construction method. What was inside? Nothing much. Some old tools, a rusted lantern, dirt floor, but the contractors said they felt uncomfortable working down there. Several of them refused to go back into that space. They said it felt wrong, like they were intruding somewhere they shouldn't be." Jennifer asked if she could see it. Dr. Reeves agreed, curious about where this investigation was leading. The basement was damp and cold, lit by bare bulbs that cast harsh shadows. The sealed room had been opened during renovations and now served as storage. Jennifer could see where the old brick wall had been removed. The bricks were a different color and texture from the surrounding foundation. She stepped into the small space. The temperature seemed to drop immediately. The air felt heavy, stagnant, as if it had been trapped there for decades. She stood in the center of the room, her breath visible in the cold, and tried to imagine what might have happened here over a century ago. Nothing in the space suggested violence or tragedy, just old brick, a dirt floor, the smell of earth and age. Yet standing there, Jennifer understood what the contractors had meant. Something about the room felt wrong. Not threatening exactly, but weighted with something unexplained. Dr. Reeves watched from the doorway. "Do you feel it?" she asked. Jennifer nodded. "Like the air is watching." Back upstairs, Dr. Reeves made tea and they sat in what had once been the Hartwell parlor. "I've lived in this house for 8 years," Dr. Reeves said. "I'm a rational person, a historian, trained to work with facts and evidence. But I can't deny that this house has something. Tenants report shadows in peripheral vision, footsteps when no one else is home, the sense of being observed. Nothing dramatic, nothing you could point to and say, that's proof. Just a persistent feeling that you're not quite alone." "Has anyone ever seen anything clearly?" Jennifer asked. One tenant about 3 years ago claimed she saw a man standing in the hallway outside her bedroom. She said he was pale, wearing old-fashioned clothing, and he just stared at her. When she turned on the light, he was gone. She moved out the next week. Jennifer showed Dr. Reeves the enhanced image of the face from the photograph. Dr. Reeves studied it for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "I can't say for certain," she finally said, "but that could match the description my former tenant gave. The fixed stare, the intensity of the eyes." She said what frightened her most wasn't that she saw something, but the way it looked at her, like it was studying her, trying to understand what she was. Leave a comment below about what you think happened in that house. David Chen, meanwhile, had been exploring another angle. He contacted photography experts and historians, asking about unusual phenomena in early glass plate photography. Most were skeptical of anything supernatural, but several mentioned that early photographic chemistry could produce unexpected results. Silver halide crystals, the compounds used in glass plate negatives, are sensitive to more than just visible light, one expert explained. They can react to X-rays, cosmic radiation, even certain chemical vapors. There are documented cases of photographs capturing things that weren't visible to the human eye at the moment of exposure. Radiation fields, gas leaks, chemical emissions. Not ghosts, but phenomena that existed in physical reality, but weren't perceivable without the camera. Could a photograph capture something human, but not visible? David asked. That ventures into territory I'm not comfortable speculating about, the expert said. But I will say this, we don't fully understand all the variables involved in early photography. The chemistry was complex, the processes were inconsistent, and there are authenticated photographs from that era that contain elements no one can fully explain. By late 2021, Jennifer and David had compiled an extensive file on the Hartwell photograph. Enhanced images, historical records, property documents, medical reports, interviews with descendants and experts. The evidence pointed in unsettling directions but reached no definitive conclusion. Edward Marsh had disappeared from the Hartwell house property in 1894. 15 years later, something that resembled his description appeared in a photograph taken in that same house. Margaret Hartwell, who had lived in that house for a decade without incident, became terrified after seeing the photograph and died within weeks. The house continued to have a reputation for unusual phenomena over the century that followed. Were these facts connected, or were they simply coincidences unrelated events that human pattern recognition tried to link into a coherent narrative. Jennifer struggled with this question. She was a practical person, educated, rational, yet she couldn't dismiss what she'd felt in that sealed basement room, couldn't ignore the accumulation of strange reports spanning more than a century, couldn't explain away the face in her great-great-grandmother's china plate. "Maybe," David said during one of their final conversations about the project, "maybe some things exist in the spaces between what we can prove and what we can perceive. Maybe early photography, with its primitive chemistry and long exposures, could capture impressions that more advanced technology misses. Maybe that house holds something, not a ghost in the traditional sense, but some kind of residual presence, some echo of what happened there. Or maybe," Jennifer countered, "it's all just coincidence and pareidolia. We see patterns because our brains are wired to find them. We feel uncomfortable in old basements because they're cold and dark. We see faces in reflections because we're primed to recognize human features even in random patterns." "Maybe," David agreed, "but that doesn't explain everything, does it?" No, Jennifer thought, it didn't explain everything. It didn't explain why Margaret Hartwell, a rational woman of her time, had been so frightened by the photograph that she couldn't sleep. It didn't explain the consistent reports from different people over different decades about feeling watched in that house. It didn't explain the sealed room in the basement, or Edward Marsh's disappearance, or that face, those eyes, staring from the surface of a china plate across 116 years. The photograph now sits in Jennifer's home office, professionally framed and preserved. Sometimes, late at night when she's working, she glances at it. At that family gathered around their Christmas table in 1909, at Margaret Hartwell, unknowing, with the china plate before her. At the face reflected there, or captured there, or manifested there by some process no one has successfully explained. Sometimes she wonders what Margaret saw when she looked at the photograph in those final weeks. What did she understand that the others didn't? What knowledge drove her to sleeplessness and fear? The photograph offers no answers, just that face, unchanging, unblinking, fixed in silver and light, watching across the decades, present in a way that defies simple explanation. Jennifer has learned to live with the uncertainty. Some mysteries, she's come to understand, are not meant to be solved. Some questions have no definitive answers. Some presences persist in the ambiguous spaces between proof and belief, between the visible and the invisible, between what was and what might have been. The face in the photograph remains. The house on Benefit Street remains. The questions remain. And perhaps that's the most unsettling truth of all. Not that we encounter the unexplained, but that we must learn to live with it, to accept that reality might contain more complexity than our rational frameworks can accommodate. What happened on Christmas Eve 1909? What appeared in that photograph? What frightened Margaret Hartwell to her death? The evidence exists. The photograph is authentic. The historical records are documented. But the explanation, the true explanation, remains elusive, hovering just beyond reach, like a face glimpsed in peripheral vision that vanishes when you turn to look directly at it. Some things, perhaps, are meant to remain in that liminal space between known and unknown, observed and unexplained. Some presences refuse to be categorized or dismissed. Some mysteries endure not because we lack information, but because the information we have refuses to form a coherent whole that fits our understanding of how reality works. The Hartwell Christmas photograph stands as a testament to this uncomfortable truth. It exists, it contains something unexplained, and no amount of analysis, enhancement, or research has succeeded in making that face any less disturbing or any more comprehensible. It watches still from 1909, from the surface of a china plate, from the space between certainty and doubt, watching whoever looks at it, as it watched the Hartwell family, as it perhaps watches still from the house on Benefit Street. Some mysteries don't seek resolution. They simply persist, reminding us that the world contains more than we can easily explain, more than we can comfortably understand. The face in the photograph remains. The question remains. And we, looking back across the years, can only wonder what we're really seeing when we stare into those fixed, unblinking eyes that stare back at us across more than a century of unanswered questions. The 1909 Hartwell Christmas photograph remains one of the most compelling examples of an unexplained image from the early photographic era. Despite modern enhancement technology and extensive historical research, the face that appears in Margaret Hartwell's china plate defies conventional explanation. Was it Edward Marsh, the missing groundskeeper whose disappearance was never solved? Was it some quirk of early photographic chemistry that coincidentally resembles a human face? Or was it something else entirely, something that existed in that house in a way we don't fully understand? We may never know with certainty. And perhaps that's the most profound aspect of this mystery. Not that it lacks an explanation, but that it resists all our attempts to provide one that fully satisfies. The photograph exists. The face is there. The historical events are documented. But the connection between them, the truth of what they mean, remains tantalizingly out of reach. If you enjoyed this exploration of one of history's most unsettling photographic mysteries, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your theories about what really appears in that photograph, what happened to Edward Marsh, and whether you believe some presences can persist beyond conventional understanding. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe and activate the notification bell so you don't miss future videos exploring the strange, the unexplained, and the mysteries that history refuses to fully reveal. Until next time, keep questioning what you see in old photographs, because sometimes the camera captures more than anyone intended, and the past refuses to stay safely in the past.